Oh dang, how do people usually start these quick reviews? I saw the Bob's Burgers movie and it was really fun. I'll try and keep this spoiler free for a bit before starting to get into the plot and whatnot. If you don't care about that, then hop to this here time right on the screen. So let's start with the spoiler free section of the review. There's a lot to like about this movie, especially if you're a Bob's Burgers fan. The movie honestly just kind of feels like a longer episode of Bob's Burgers, and I mean that in the absolute best way. The movie kind of sets out to deal with a lot of topics that we've seen kind of hinted at throughout the series, and actually gives a slight payoff for a few of them, which is something I really wasn't expecting too much, at least not as much as we ended up seeing. What might actually be one of the biggest selling points of the movie is actually the animation itself, which kind of feels weird to say about a show like Bob's Burgers. The animation in the show isn't bad by any means, but the film really does take it to the next level. It's super crisp and at times it has kind of a Muppety feel to it, again in the best possible way. There's a fluidity to it that we haven't seen in Bob's Burgers, and that really helps the summertime joy that the film seems to be trying to emulate pretty early in the film. If for no other reason, you should go see this film simply because who knows when we'll get another 2D animated film released nationwide in theaters. It's an art style that's unfortunately falling off, and the more support it gets, the more likely we'll be to get more media like this. It's a super fun film, the comedy's on point, the music is great as always, and the family is as wholesome and loving as you'd expect. I'll be jumping into story and plot spoilers, so go see this if you haven't and then come back. Watch this video again. Tell me if you agree or don't down in the comments. Anyways, spoilers, I warned you. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so the family is the closest they've ever been to actually shutting down. They have less than a week to pay their loan payment to the bank, or they lose not technically the restaurant, but everything in the restaurant. So basically the restaurant. And of course, a huge sinkhole opens right in front of the restaurant, basically ensuring they won't be able to come up with the money. The kids' subplots, or at least Tina and Jean's small arcs throughout the film, feel kind of tacked on. Tina being nervous about Jimmy Jr. and Jean being nervous about music not only don't really contribute anything to the film, but it almost kind of feels like it might be a bit out of character for them. Yes, all three kids are going through similar arcs, where they're sort of self-doubting, and by the end of the film, they've grown and sort of accepted the parts of themselves they were nervous about. But Tina and Jean's parts feel like they don't really add anything overall. The Louise subplot is the same idea done really well, with her dealing with her sort of growing out of her bunny ears and trying to prove that she's not a baby. And that actually gives us some really sweet payoff for not just why Louise wears the bunny ears, but we even get to see Bob's mom for the first time in the entirety of the series, which is actually really sweet and recontextualizes everything we know about Louise's hat. I am happy that I did kind of guess that we'd get at least something about Bob's mom in the movie, and I was genuinely surprised we got as much as we did when it felt like it just kind of came out of nowhere. But that's just the subplot. The main plot of the film revolves around trying to solve a full dang murder. Yeah, that's right, someone in the show got hard murdered 6 years ago, and their body was found and partially accidentally eaten by Louise after she falls into the sinkhole outside the restaurant. So the movie's kind of a whodunit with the fish odors. Is it Mr. Fish Odor, his brother, or is it their cousin who has a bigger role in this movie than he's had at basically any point in the few episodes he's appeared in? Yeah, it's the cousin, obviously. They wouldn't get rid of a character like Mr. Fish Odor or his brother if they could help it, and honestly, there aren't really any other characters who it could have been, unless they were going to introduce a new character at the last minute, which would just be really bad writing. So despite the movie trying to do the whole, oh man, who could it be, was it really Mr. Fish Odor thing, it's fairly obvious throughout, or at least I thought it was. But this isn't the kind of movie that you're watching for the mystery of it. We're more in it for the hangout, the kids doing their best to undercover the killer, getting into hijinks, and we get to see a good bit of different characters as the kids are running around town while skipping school. Towards the end of the movie, the family is buried alive in a go-kart type vehicle. Speaking of which, the whole introduction of the go-karts is pretty clunky. They actually kind of stop the whole film's progress and basically say, hey, look at these go-karts, also where are the stuffed animal? They're all gone, wink wink. It really comes across as they thought it might be a little confusing when these two major plot devices aren't introduced at all, but it just feels a bit weird to be honest. Like it really drags everything to a halt for a moment. And I am a little surprised that they let the family seem like they were going to die for as long as they did. I mean, the bulk of the characters in the situation are children, and they're in a really dire situation and being forced to kind of face their own mortality. Tina doesn't freak out nearly as much as you'd think though, mostly because the story is focusing more on Louise at this point. One thing I really didn't like is the lack of side characters who are actually present in the film. Like, I can't actually remember if regular-sized Rudy had any lines. Maybe he had like one when Louise is called a baby early in the film, but he's basically non-existent. Same for Jimmy Jr., Zeke, Tammy, and Jocelyn. They're borderline non-existent for the entirety of the film. And Jimmy Jr. mostly just appears as the Jimmy Jr. in Tina's fantasies. I get that they don't want to have too many characters, so it's not necessary to see the series in order to enjoy the film, but they could have done something with them at some point. It's an easy movie to enjoy, and it feels like a really good way to sort of usher in the summer. It has that feel about it the entire time throughout, and if you're a fan of the series, and honestly, even if you're not, you'll definitely find something in the film that you'll be able to enjoy. It's some of the most refreshing Bob's Burgers that I've watched in a while. A definite high point for the series, and a fantastically fun movie throughout. Go check it out.